Hello everyone, this is part 8 of What If Naruto Was Told About His Uzumaki Genes Early, and I hope you guys enjoy this video, and to like, to subscribe, to see more, comment down below. Now years has it been since he last stepped into the village. Naruto felt neither excitement nor the longing to be finally home. This village had been nothing but a curse to his very existence. There had been days he had been walking around, feeling as if he had been carrying its full weight on his shoulders. A treacherous and miserable life that he had been forced to live. But he had endured. He had accepted the hatred that these people pushed towards him. He had carried it without falling down. The hatred, the loathing, the contempt, but Naruto had never hated himself. He loved his life. He was a miserable person who has chosen to shoulder the hatred and contempt rather than to try to live happily. That was his decision and he was content with it. Naruto was truly glad that the Sandaime told him about his mother, the Uzumaki clan. He couldn't even think of how his life would have turned out if the old man hadn't informed him of the truth when he did. Hiruzen hadn't told him about the Kyuubi, he had found out about it. He hadn't been hurt. He hadn't felt betrayed by the Sandaime Hokage. Naruto had laughed hard the day he had found it because, finally, everything had made sense. It had made sense why they hated him. But it hadn't made his life any better. He knew the Sandaime had passed a law forbidding people from mentioning the Kyuubi, but it didn't change anything. Naruto shook his head and took a deep breath. He frowned inwardly. The air around the village was still the same, contaminated. Naruto, Jiraiya called with patience. The blonde was walking a bit slowly. Come on, I've got things to do. Naruto glanced over at the perverted Sannin for a moment before shaking his head. No doubt you are thinking about going on a peeping road show, he said calmly. Would you like for me to accompany you? Jiraiya halted and turned to face Naruto with wide eyes. He seemed excited. Really? You'd come with? I could do the watching while you write what I tell you to write, he said. He could focus his attention on his eyes so that he doesn't end up missing anything. Of course not, Naruto said blankly. I'm not a perverted old geezer who likes peeping on young girls. I swear one day you are going to get your balls crushed and that foot between your pants cut off. Jiraiya immediately put his hands between his thighs as if to protect himself from an oncoming attacking. Don't say things like that, he said with a wince at the thought of being crushed. Naruto shrugged. I'll say whatever I want, he then smiled. I think it would be amusing if that happened. I think I wouldn't be against the idea of exposing you and then holding you down just so it can happen. Jiraiya glared at Naruto. What a cold-hearted student has earned for himself. He did shudder at the thought of Naruto going through that statement. It made him afraid. He could see the blonde doing something like that. Of course, he didn't for a moment think of quitting. If he got caught, he would beg and make promises he couldn't keep. If you do that, I stop being your sensei. I'll disown you. Naruto said with indifference. You have already served your purpose. Perhaps I should even stop calling your sensei now since you won't be training me. Naruto looked to think about it for a moment. You can be so cold sometimes, Naruto, Jiraiya said with a hurt look on his face. After a moment, he spoke again when Naruto didn't respond. I expect you to be lively to ease Haime's worries. Don't worry, I will put my face between her bust just to show her how much you have corrupted me. Naruto said with a smile. Tsunade's reaction would be amusing, but perhaps more so would be Jiraiya's. Naruto was certain the Toad Sage would be turning around to glare at him for doing something he couldn't get to do. No doubt he has had so many miserable days just thinking about the Godaime's large chest. Instead of turning to pummel him, she was likely to turn towards Jiraiya and hit him hard to turning him into a shameless pervert. On second thoughts, I'm not going to see her with you. Naruto just laughed, seeing the fear in Jiraiya's eyes. Oh sensei, you truly have been exposed to too much of her beatings. Worry not, if you give me your spot, I will behave. His spot. The window. Never. You are not sitting on my place. Whoever arrives first claims it, Naruto said with wide smile. Harem no Jutsu. In a puff of smoke, a couple of young beautiful ladies appeared before the Sannin with innocent looks. Seeing Jiraiya turning on a perverted look at the almost naked girls, Naruto didn't even laugh. he just shook his head and then disappeared, leaving Jiraiya alone to nurse his nosebleed. Hokage's office. Tsunade didn't hold herself from rushing over to Naruto when he stepped into the office with a small smile on his lips. Finally, he had returned. She was happy to see him alive, so well and so happy. She was happy that he had grown and that he was back in her presence and she could see him. 3 long years and she didn't see this person, but now she was finally able to see him. When she was the last time her heart felt so warm at just seeing someone she loved so alive and well. Naruto, the Godime Hokage whispered as she pulled the blonde over to a tight hug. She smiled warmly as she embraced him, her strength gaining by the second. And then, Naruto disappeared in a puff of smoke. Tsunade blinked. The happiness she had been filled with disappeared in a second when she realized that she had been hugging a clone of the blonde. She was now furious. How could he do that to her? She twirled around and saw him sitting by the window, a wide smile on his lips. He was waving his right hand slowly. Out of frustration and perhaps a bit of too much happiness, Tsunade grabbed a chair and flung it towards the blonde. Naruto ducked under to avoid getting hit by the chair. He watched it pass just above him and through the window for a second before sitting up. His smile didn't leave him. It is pleasant you are still energetic, Bar-chan. Then again, it would have been unpleasant if you lost your strength with age. Tsunade glared at the blonde. Do you want to send you to the hospital? Naruto held up both his hands in the air and got up from the window. He walked over to the Godime Hokage and stopped just inches away from her. A charming smile slipped through his lips. Princess Tsunade, he said in a slow tone. I'm truly happy to see you again. It has been quite some time, after all. He then leaned closer. Please let me express myself. He kissed the Hokage on the right cheek before quickly moving away to avoid being hit. Jiraiya whistled as he appeared in the office. Tsunade didn't hear it, she just stared at the retreated blonde with unblinking eyes. What the hell just happened? Naruto of the old wouldn't have done something like that. He had manners, yes, but he didn't treat her like a woman. It was always the old hag. Tsunade shook her head and walked over to chair without saying another word. You came here a little quickly, sensei. Naruto said to the Toad Sage. I'm not as simple as you think. The Sannin said with a shake of his head. Naruto smiled. Oh really? I don't like the way you are smiling now, Naruto, Jiraiya said with a nervous look on his face. I was simply going to suggest that I perform the jutsu, but this time, a bit X-rated to see if you really won't get a nosebleed. Naruto said with his smile. There was just no way he wouldn't get a nosebleed. Naruto was playing with fire here and he wouldn't stand for it. Of course, if the blonde activated the jutsu, he wouldn't be able to help himself but try to look. Jiraiya didn't have to respond as Tsunade finally spoke. What jutsu are we talking about here? She demanded with narrowed eyes. Naruto merely smiled. It is a hidden jutsu that has worked against the most powerful shinobi, even a man who once claimed the title of God of Shinobi, the blonde said proudly. In any case, we have returned from our training trip. Naruto turned his eyes towards the silent Shizune. He smiled towards the black-haired woman. Shizune, how rude of me, you look delightful as always. He tilted his head to the side. You seem to have a certain glow about you, fallen in love. Shizune blinked before smiling. It is good to see you too, Naruto, she said. I wasn't looking, she said. Love doesn't find only those who are looking, dear. Naruto said with a small shake of his head. The human heart is an unpredictable thing. You might tell yourself you are not looking for love, you won't ever love again, but one day, you meet someone and it starts racing, while whispering soothing sounds to your ears. Since when did you become the romance expert? Tsunade asked with a raised eyebrow. She looked at him carefully, his hair, it had truly grown and he didn't look to be taking care of it. It was as if he didn't really touch it. That aside, he had become a handsome young man. It wasn't bad at all. She could understand why Temari had seemed so keen on him. She hadn't commented on it, but the Suna Kanoiki had spoken about him in glowing terms. Perhaps she liked him. Well, what was there not to like? You forget who his sensei was, Haim, Jiraiya intervened, with a proud smile. Naruto snorted. Please don't take credit for something you didn't do, Ero Sennin. The only thing you could have possibly taught me would to. Jiraiya flashed towards Naruto and put his hands around his mouth to stop him from continuing to speak. Now, there is no need to say anything. The Sannin whispered. Tsunade looked curious. What were you going to say, Naruto? She demanded while shooting daggers towards Jiraiya, who was still standing beside Naruto. Nothing much, it isn't like he has many stories to tell about romance anyway. Naruto said with a shrug before walking over to the window. He looked down the streets as silence fell into the office. Tsunade studied Naruto's body language for a moment before shaking her head. He was back in the hidden leaf, and now that he had returned, she didn't know what to do with him. Put together Team 7. Perhaps they could do that because of the kind of times they now found themselves in. There was likely to be war in the coming years. Konoha had to be ready, and everyone had to be ready. She wouldn't complain if it doesn't happen. Shinobi were trained to fight, to be strong for their village. Having a strong military presence only strengthens Konoha. I was worried that you might have returned damaged, Tsunade said before casting a glare towards Jiraiya. Who knows what this pervert might have tried to teach you? I am not unguarded, Naruto said. Besides, it was a little too late for Jiraiya to corrupt me, he said before turning to face the Godime Hokage. Things seem to have changed in this village, perhaps I am reading the atmosphere wrong. Tsunade was silent for a couple of moments before she responded. You already know what is happening, so we have to be ready for whatever happens in the future. Now that you have returned, it will be good if you were to play an active role in the mediation between Uzushio and Konoha. It would work well with Naruto's presence. They'd yet to say anything to her, and she was getting a bit worried. They had said they would contact Konoha, but they haven't been saying anything. It wasn't like they were ignorant of what was happening in the elemental nations or the threat that villages like it were posed. They knew, and yet according to Kakashi, they hadn't looked a bit concerned, and that worried her more than anything. If they were not concerned, there was something that was making them confident. There had to be a reason. They had been destroyed once, they would certainly do everything in their power to defend themselves. People once thought it was impossible to invade Uzushio because of the whirlpools, but it had been done once and it could be done again. Diplomacy isn't really my thing, Naruto said calmly. Besides, are you sure that you want to send me to Uzushio? Are you going to give me a reason why I shouldn't? Naruto stared at the woman for a moment before looking back at the window. You're the Godime Hokage, and regardless of your feelings, your duty to your village comes first. You made an oath to protect this village with your life, and you will do so. We should not avoid being honest with each. I am considered a flight risk, yes, he glanced over at the Godime Hokage, waiting for her response. Anbu have determined that to be the case, Tsunade said. Naruto nodded. Why? I am Uzumaki, and Konoha hasn't done anything for me that would make me choose it over Uzushio. It is like if you are in an abusive relationship, if another lover shows up and promises to treat you tenderly, you will abandon your current lover for something that promises to be better. The situation with me is like that, and I can understand that. I also appreciate the fact that you are not casting me glares. Seeing more of Uzu tempts me. I saw the village, it is lovely, and perhaps if I go there I might feel at home. Perhaps your reason for doing this would be to try to keep me feeling like that even though I am with Konoha, I am also playing for Uzushio. It doesn't matter regardless, the fact is that I am considered a flight risk. He paused, taking a thoughtful expression. You'd call me a very S-rank flight risk. Are you rejecting the idea? Of course not, Naruto said with a shrug of his shoulders. As long as I am a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf, I am work for Konoha's interests. Admittedly, this would be a bit complicated. I'm surprised that you don't look offended that your own village would consider you a flight risk. Many shinobi would be pissed off if they learned that their village considered them such. Tsunade said. Being considered a flight risk would be an insult, but this isn't the worst thing Konoha has done, isn't it? Besides that, the risk isn't determined by what you feel but by the circumstances that surround us. I assume whoever came to the conclusion looked into my history in the present and determined that even though I haven't expressed any desire to leave, anything can still happen. Naruto explained lightly. Tsunade smiled. You have really grown, Naruto. She said calmly. You're no longer just a brat that I must worry about. What is born must grow, Naruto said with a smile. Since you admit that I am no longer just a brat, can I take out Shizune for dinner tonight? Tsunade was shocked before a moment before shaking her head. Go play with someone your age. Naruto merely smiled. The matters of the heart do not care for age or physical appearance, Princess Tsunade, the blonde said calmly. But I shall retreat, enjoy the rest of your day. Saying that, Naruto departed the office through the door. Then, what? Jiraiya smiled innocently. I didn't do anything to him, but don't be fooled by that. He is just fooling around, at least Jiraiya hoped the blonde was. Sometimes he couldn't tell what was really going on in Naruto's mind. Tsunade shook her head. Well, everything looks fine, he thinks well, but then again, he hadn't been stupid. He was just a silent child who looked miserable. Jiraiya wanted to say it, but he did not. What was inside of Naruto's heart wasn't misery. Naruto could smile and laugh, but when he was alone, he became expressionless. It was always like when he was with people, he put on a mask that people could accept and he did it perfectly. Jiraiya would not say something like that, it would only worry Tsunade. For now, they just had to be happy that the blonde was here in Konoha and not in a zoo. Jiraiya took out a small sheet of paper he had wrapped up. He handed it over to the Godime. This is a list of the jutsus I know about Naruto and how I have rated him about all ninja arts. What do you mean everything you know? There are things that I don't know, Jiraiya said with a shrug. He didn't show me everything. He is also a master of fuinjutsu. He's not going to show that around, but I do assume it is something that needs to be kept secret. You don't want people afraid that he might release the Kyuubi since he knows fuinjutsu. Tsunade smiled bitterly. He'll be releasing it now. Will they be accepting that he isn't the Kyuubi but just its host? She asked calmly. That is a little too late, don't you think? Jiraiya frowned upon hearing those words. He didn't expect Tsunade to come up with something like that. He shook his head. I didn't mean the villagers, he said. I but guess they too would be wary. We just have to keep it to ourselves. We believe nothing bad will happen but others might not. With Naruto stared at the faces of the past cages, an interesting monument. All cages had been powerful but Naruto couldn't decide who had been the strongest between the Shodai Hokage and the Sandaime. The Sandaime had been bestowed with the title of God of Shinobi while the first wasn't. Even if Konoha itself was weak, with the Sandaime still in his prime, no one would dare anything. It was no wonder the old man was respected. There were not much stories about Hashirama, but only that he was a beast. When it came to skills though, and just pure genius, it was perhaps safe to say Hiruzen stood out. But of all the cages to have ever led this village, his father, the Yondaime Hokage, was celebrated as the village's greatest hero. The Kyuubi would have certainly turned this village into a memory if not for the efforts of the Yondaime. No, Naruto shook his head. What of his mother, who was the one who pinned down the Beiyu with her adamantine sealing chakra chains? Konoha celebrated his father as its greatest hero and yet tormented his child as the evil that killed many of its loved ones. There had days they had seen his miserable look, the days they saw him walking down the streets, shoulders down, looking defeated, but they never saw a child who had no parents, a child who longed to be loved. They saw a nine-tailed Beiyu that killed their loved ones. A child. A beast. They couldn't separate the two. Hatred really did make people believe and do certain things that are unforgivable. Reason doesn't matter when you are clouded by hatred. Naruto didn't wish to turn his life into such a hollow existence in which he lived for nothing more than hatred, vengeance. He would never find peace if he went down that road. But if people were willing to take him to that path, Naruto would indulge them with every fiber of his being. Naruto looked away from the Hokage monument and placed his hands inside his pockets. As he started walking away, he realized he was being watched by someone. He sighed, he just got back to this goddamned village and he was already being watched. The Sandaime wouldn't have allowed for something like this to happen. He walked towards his old stomping ground, the training ground he had shared with Team 7. He stood still in the clearing, eyes looking up into the heavens. Please come out, while I have the patience to stand here like this all day, I have other things to do, so I can't entertain you for longer periods. Naruto's eyes glanced towards his left side. A huge beast was rushing towards him. He sighed tiredly. He had no problems fighting someone, but he really didn't like doing boring battles against weak people. Perhaps this was because he spent much of his time fighting someone like Jiraiya. The Sannin wasn't like a Jonin, he was above that. He held out his left hand and channeled his wind sword. When the beast jumped towards him, Naruto swung his hand in a downward slash. The beast was sliced in half, and it burst into black ink. Naruto raised an eyebrow seeing this. It was something he hadn't seen before, a rare ability. Sai flashed on Naruto's right hand, flashing a kunai towards the blonde's shoulder in an upward slash. Naruto jumped back slightly to avoid the slash. He twirled around to face the pale black-haired teenager. The kunai was flung towards his forehead with sharp accuracy. Naruto tilted his head to the left, and the kunai sped past his head. Sai was upon him, trying to punch him on his gut. Naruto caught the punch with his right hand. His hold was like a tight iron grip. What do you want? Sai frowned, trying to break free, but Naruto didn't budge. He might not look like it, but he certainly had massive physical strength. He wasn't even being taken seriously. He sighed and stopped struggling. Naruto freed him, but the next second, he was standing just inches away from him, cold blue eyes staring at him. Sai tried to make the distance when he felt an immeasurable pressure suffocating him, but the blonde caught him on his right shoulder. I don't know you, you're not even wearing a leaf headband. If I burst a hole through your gut, I can get away with it, can't I? Especially since you just attacked me without saying anything. When he was saying that, Naruto had a ball of flames on the palm of his right hand. Sai's expression didn't change, but he felt afraid. He'd forgotten what fear meant, but he felt it now. He was becoming familiar with it now. He couldn't even breathe because there was some force that was making it impossible for him. No matter how hard his nose tried to suck in oxygen, he couldn't get it in. When Naruto let him go and twisted around, walking away, Sai fell on his knees. His breathing was labored. He was finally able to breathe. It felt good to be able to breathe again. But he had learned. Naruto was a frightening person. Much more frightening than Danzo. Of course, he would never admit that to anyone. Foundation hideout. Jiraiya had never really given himself time to come down here, but now that he was here, he certainly didn't like it. The air was cold and it made him think of the cold and brutal training that Danzo gives his operatives. Naruto would have been a monster if Danzo had trained him, a demon perhaps. The Warhawk prioritizes the QB, and he would have made sure the blonde trained hard to control the power before he could even write or read. Worse, Naruto wouldn't have had the emotions needed for a human. He was truly glad that the Sandaime had made sure that Naruto was far away from Danzo's hands. He didn't mind that he was surrounded by a couple of NE agents. They didn't frighten him. Not to sound arrogant, but these shinobi in here were just too young to threaten him. Of course, if they wanted a fight, Jiraiya would ensure that they received a fight. He was nevertheless not here for a fight. He was here to speak to Danzo about what he had learned in Omegakure. Jiraiya hadn't told Tsunade about it, but he was going to have a word about it with the Warhawk. There was no telling what this man would do behind Tsunade's back. If he thought that she was weak and naive, he would take measures that were likely to earn Konoha more trouble in the future. He was Danzo, he would always be fanatical about his love and what he does things for Konoha. He was always extreme. When the cripple walked over to him, Jiraiya felt the urge to lunge towards the man and grab him by his throat before demanding answers, but he was unlikely to gain any answers. He also wanted to see what was behind those bandages, but he was unlikely to see anything until the man was dead. Jiraiya, Danzo said with narrowed eyes. He was on guard and ready to move if there was a need. He couldn't read anything from the Sannin. Despite his naive views and idealist beliefs, Danzo did think that the man was a loyal servant of the Hidden Leaf. He was essential to the village's power. However, if he became a problem, Danzo wouldn't have a problem making sure the man was dead. There were many tools, and if Jiraiya disappeared, it would be easy to get his hands on the QB. Danzo, Jiraiya said in a stern tone. What was your relationship with Hanzo of Omegakure? Danzo's eyes sharpened. There was something that the man knew, which was why he was asking the question. He would not fall for it. Shouldn't you be talking about Naruto and the Uzumaki? It would also make sense for you to even stay in the village to train more shinobi in preparation for war. That is something we should be talking about, Jiraiya. Who said there is going to be war? It is a possibility but not a sure thing, Jiraiya said. Even if there was war, his network was fundamental. He couldn't stay in the village for far too long. He wasn't even thinking about taking any student at this time. Whether you might want to believe it or not, there is going to be war. Though I was surprised that Tsunade recognized it and stepped away from Hiruzen's naive methods, there is still much that is lacking. Perhaps that was true, but Jiraiya couldn't talk with Danzo regarding the matter. The Warhawk would be willing to sow the seeds himself for war to make sure it happens, thinking that they would greatly profit off it and improve Konoha's standing. Either way, you are not the Hokage and we will not let you do as you please, Danzo. I am here to let you know that, Jiraiya said, leaking a bit of his killing intent. I have never been afraid of doing what needs to be done to protect Konoha. If it means killing everyone in here and you, I will do it. For certain, Jiraiya would do it. He might be naive and holding the teachings of the Sandaime Hokage, but he was able to work, to do what needed to be done. I see, Danzo only said. Tell me about Am and Hanzo. Danzo was silent for a moment before responding. Hanzo and I had a working relationship. I cannot divulge the details, but we stopped receiving communication from him during the time there was a civil war. I assume he is dead. It has been years anyway. When the man came to the conclusion that Hanzo was dead, he probably didn't bother trying to find for sure but just decided there was no need. The relationship had run its course. I was told that you conspired with Hanzo to remove a certain group in Omegakure. You sent people in to handle things. But Hanzo lost and that person knows what you did. He might come after you and when he does, Konoha will not shield you. We will feed you to him. I didn't tell Tsunade this because she doesn't need to know. She will probably decide to cut you off if she is told. The things you did in Am are nothing short of treasonous. However, this is a delicate time for Konoha. Eliminating resources won't do us any good. Stay on course, Danzo. Danzo stared. Now he had to deal with this and he already had the Uzumaki. Very soon, they will be making a move and it wasn't going to spell nice things for him. Danzo didn't show it nevertheless. You were outside of Konoha and Sasuke has already left Orochimaru. It has been months now and he was suddenly disappeared. I'm not really concerned about the Uchiha, Jiraiya said with a shake of his head. Yes, you'd be concerned about Naruto. How far is his connection with Uzushio? At this point, it would be naive to think that he has no connections to the clan. That isn't your concern, Danzo, Jiraiya said, turning away from the war hawk. We will find Sasuke and at this point, I will object him being given to you. You are not behaving, but if you behave, I might change my mind, the Toad Sage said before disappearing from the view. Sai stepped up having just returned moments ago. He knelt before the master of the underworld before speaking. I was able to get close to him but not able to anything. I will need to be in a team with him to be able to learn anything. Tsunade had yet to agree on his plan to put Sai in Team 7. Danzo was a little itchy because of this but he would have to try again. He needed to stay close. He needed to keep an eye on Naruto and the only way to do so was putting Sai on the team. Improvements on his skill. Last time the blonde had butchered his agents but he figured they were just weak. Answer, Sai had to do it and he also needed an improvement. He toyed with me, Sai said in an emotionless tone. He is way stronger than anticipated. My attacks on him seemed to be like nothing but child's play. The blonde hadn't even seemed interested in anything. Danzo wasn't disappointed nor was he pleased. Naruto could be strong, that was to be expected since he was a Jinchuriki. But he wanted to see if the blonde could use the Kyuubi's power. That could prove to be their trump card if war came to their door. He would need to gain control over the blonde in that case and he could do it. He had Shisui's eye. He could work on both Naruto and the Kyuubi if there was a need. There was no time to train another Jinchuriki as war could break out any time. That aside, Naruto could leave any time. This was why he really needed to keep an eye on the blonde. Later that day this was his first time in a bar in the Hidden Leaf. He never visited the places before when he was still fooling around with Team 7. He'd never imagined that he would end up here. He didn't even think that upon his return to the Leaf, he would the desire to be upon such a crowd. He didn't want to sit with anyone or chat with anyone, he just wanted to be alone. This was a shinobi place, it would be difficult but he would hold a sign above his head that says that he didn't want to be disturbed. Naruto ignored the looks from the shinobi around. He had seen some faces around. The shinobi population, especially the experienced ones, hadn't been all high on contempt for him. When the villagers drove the wagon of pure loathing, they stepped away because they understood the situation. They had seen it before. They had heard about it. He went to the bar and made his order before going to sit next to a lone dark table. Naruto leaned against the wall and stared at the bottles on the table for a moment. The noise around him silenced. He could only see people moving around in slow motion. It was a bit beautiful. There was silence, peace, but he didn't enjoy it for too long. He didn't get to drown on his misery. Someone burst his little bubble. His puddle of pathetic memories was splashed across his face when a hand wrapped around his right shoulder. He could feel a woman's breasts pressed against his back. He felt a slick hairs of a tongue running through the edges of his left ear. Naruto felt a chill run his spine. What is a handsome young man sitting by himself on a warm and beautiful night like this? Anko asked, in a sly tone. Naruto glanced over to his shoulder. He saw the face. He didn't really like it when someone came up to him like this. He hated it. Not in a bad way. Perhaps the mischievous part of him wanted to play along. Proctor-san, Naruto responded with a smile on his lips. He turned around to face the woman. Her face was just inches away from his. This was a crazy sadistic bitch he had seen in the Chunin exams, the second stage proctor. If he seemed to recall, she had issues with Orochimaru. Snakes. Oh, yes, she had been his beloved apprentice, and when Orochimaru turned traitor, Konoha stared at the student. Why did she stay when she had been happily sitting on his shoulders? Humans, they always had to glare at someone for something. You have truly grown, Anko said, grinning. His bravery only excited her. It enticed her to move closer, to let loose a little. He was still just a brat, what could he do? With her experience, she could dominate him and make him cry like a little girl. And she would enjoy that show with a good round of laughter. I see you still have the love for danger, Naruto said in a calm tone. It didn't bother him that he could feel her breath, the smell of alcohol. She had certainly been drinking before sporting him alone in his little corner. He cupped her chin and tilted his head to the side. I hadn't noticed, you have a delightful face up close. He pulled her closer until her nose was pressed against his. Can I caress your lips? Anko blinked in surprise, but before she could laugh, Naruto did as he had asked without waiting for her response. It caught the Jonin off guard, but she didn't let it show as she was able to respond to the kiss before Naruto pulled away and turned around. The Jonin stared at the back for the blonde for a moment, before a splitting grin spread across her lips. She walked over to the side and sat across him. He was slightly amused. Did I surprise you? He asked. He seemed to know what he was talking about, if the look on his eyes was anything to go by. Anko didn't let a frown settle on her lips. It wasn't disappointing. The surprise wasn't so bad. It was actually a good thing, and she was very happy. Maybe, she said with a shrug. You're not going to deny or confirm it, Naruto said. Do you always like to unsettle young men who are drinking alone? No, but you are not just anyone, are you? Anko asked with a grin on her lips. The Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, and the last time we had such a famous blonde shinobi in Konoha, was when she had the Yondaime Hokage. Famous. Naruto laughed. She had a funny way of putting things. Infamous is the right way to putting things in the right perspective, don't you think? It depends on your view, Anko said carelessly. It doesn't seem to concern you much though. She eyed him carefully when he merely shrugged indifferently in response. Now, why are you sitting alone? You haven't been in the village for a couple of years. It doesn't matter if I have been away for a day or a year, Naruto said indifferently. But you're also here, it means you came alone. Should I be asking you the same question? I didn't come alone, Anko said, pointing at a group of shinobi. I was with them before I saw you. You looked really comfortable. Learning new things from Jiraiya-sama. Naruto smiled. I'm certain if I had learned anything from him I would be dropping under the table to check which color you were wearing, he said. Who said I am even wearing anything under my skirt? Anko asked with a grin on her lips. You can check for yourself if you don't believe my words. Naruto had to pause and stare at the audacity of this woman. She would say something like that to him. She knew one would be interested in taking a peek. Jiraiya would certainly relish in sitting with a woman like this. Naruto was starting to see that she was certainly above his pay grade. If I go down, my hand will have to reach. Sometimes I don't believe what my eyes show me, so I confirm with a sense of touch. Anko laughed. Perverted brat, she said. Want to confirm? She asked slyly. Naruto thought about it for a moment before shaking his head. The night is still young for such festivities. I'm afraid if my hand goes there, I will end up taking you to my den. What would be the problem? We could have the whole night. Naruto smiled. Oh, she was good at this game. Then again, she was older, and experienced, a sadist no less. Let us enjoy the night, Anko. Besides, I don't need the whole to satisfy you. Anko stared at him for a long minute before bursting out in laughter. Why do I get the sense that though this is a play, there is some truth in your words? Before Naruto could respond, he glanced over at his left, seeing a certain silver-haired Jonin walking towards him along with Asuma. He was certainly not going to get his quietness. But he should have known. This was Konoha. Well, at least none of his former classmates in the academy frequented this place. They were probably at home or dinning somewhere while eating meat. Naruto faced Anko once more, before smiling. Because that is the truth, you want to test it? He said in a serious tone. Someone seems to be having fun, Kakashi said, pulling a chair along with Asuma. He sat down and faced Anko with a nice smile. I see Naruto is telling you sweet things. Well, he knows how to behave, unlike you. Anko said with a stare. You are stiff and no fun. The only thing that gives you a reaction is that little orange book of yours, she said with distaste, not at the book but over the fact that the man would ignore a live woman in favor for giggling while reading his book. Now, Anko, there is no need to be hostile while we just sat down. Kakashi chided. Naruto faced Kakashi. I'd always assumed that you were a closet pervert, Kakashi. You probably wouldn't fall for some lewd talk because you are chained in your closet or just have excellent control of yourself, he said. Closet? Anko asked with a surprise. He reads his book in public. Naruto shrugged indifferently. It's not exactly porn, he said before turning to face the bearded Sarutobi sitting on his right. Asuma, he greeted with a small smile. Naruto, Asuma returned the smile. I haven't been seeing much of you over the past years, I have to say, I never imagined that you'd turn out to be this person. This person? Naruto asked. You mean sitting here with a sadist while exchanging pleasantries? Well, not exactly pleasantries, it was a lot less like soft foreplay, don't you think? He glanced at Anko who laughed before responding. Yeah, she said. I have to say, it does show that you learned under Jiraiya-sama, she said. Well, you pick up certain things when you spend time under someone, Naruto said calmly. What are you doing here, Kakashi? You never seemed like a person who went out with other Jonins for drinks. You'd always seemed like a recluse to me. Another miserable person. There was no doubt that Kakashi was a lonesome person who was held up by his dark past. He didn't let it show to his students, but anyone who checked would know that the man was filled with nothing but regrets. Perhaps this was why the man even felt he needed to solely focus on Sasuke during the Chunin exams. He was surrounded by miserable people, wasn't he? Jiraiya was miserable, Tsunade was held up in her past that she couldn't love anyone now, and he had his problems. But that was alive, his life, and he accepted it as it was. Maybe it would change in the near future, maybe it would not. He was ready for anything. Kakashi I smiled. That is harsh, Naruto. Well, he's not exactly off the mark, Anko said, to which Asuma nodded. The Jonin shrugged his shoulders carelessly. Naruto smiled, it was something he did in such situations. Maybe he learned it from this man, maybe it just came naturally when you didn't want to talk about things and didn't want to sound too concerned. What are you even doing here? Your friends don't visit this place. Naruto shrugged before turning towards Anko. What? I thought I would get lucky today, Anko laughed while Asuma looked surprised by that response. Yeah, right, the snake mistress said with sarcasm. You were sitting all alone looking miserable before I decided to rescue things before you drank yourself to sleep and wake up in dark alley somewhere without any clothes. Naruto merely smiled. This could be my play, Anko-chan, he said in a slow tone. I sit alone, drinking because some predator will come after me, thinking I am just another miserable brat they can conquer for the night, but not really knowing they are the prey. I think we shouldn't allow you to come here alone, Anko said with a stare. You sound dangerous, Naruto just laughed. The one who is dangerous is you, Anko, he said. Asuma quickly tried to steer the conversation away from the current subject. So, Naruto, how was the training trip? Training under Jiraiya-sama, you must have learned many things. The following day ramen, his beloved daily meal. How many times had he thought of the noodles sliding down his throat, the aroma smell filling his nostrils. The joy his tongue felt when it tasted the delicious meal. The purring sound his stomach made when the noodles settled down in its chambers. This food was his holy cup. He had missed it. Not just for how good it was, for also its sentimental value. Sitting here was more than just eating good food, It was sitting in a place that accepted him, a place that welcomed him when everyone in the village shunned him. He had been told, even if he was broke, he could eat for free. These people would let him eat for free. He never had to eat for free because the Sandaime Hokage made sure he always had something. Many shops didn't even want the demon's money. Even some greedy bastards would wash it down the drain simply because it was his money, rotten pieces of craps. But he had endured the emotional abuse. He did not break. He didn't let them win. They certainly did make him miserable, but at the end of the journey, he would ask, "Who is laughing now?" Ayami smiled happily when her favorite customer settled in with a happy smile on his lips. She had surely missed his face. "Naruto," she greeted him happily. "It is so good to see you again," she said. She wanted to rush over the counter and hug, but she held herself. "Likewise, Ayami," Naruto said with a smile. He closed his eyes and breathed in the smell of ramen. "God, I miss this smell. I'm going to eat until I can't take it anymore today," Ayami laughed. "As much as I love you eating our ramen, we can't have that. We don't want anything happening to you for overeating. You know, even if you eat too much of healthy foods, you can get sick. There must always be a balance." "I know, but you just can't help it with Ichiraku ramen," the blonde said. "I'll be watching you," Ayami said. "The usual?" she asked. Naruto nodded. "Please bring 3 for now, I will get 3 more after I'm done with the first load. I freed up my stomach yesterday." And he had been drinking. What a pain this was to his body, but for filling up on ramen, it was worth it. 2 at a time, Ayami said before walking away from him. Naruto just shook his head and waited for what seemed to be an eternity. He didn't even notice when someone walked into the stand or sat down just away from him. When Ayami finally brought his bowls, Naruto clapped his hands, said his thanks before inhaling the steam. He started to dig in. Ayami watched him for a moment before speaking. "You have grown big, you've turned out to be a handsome young man," she said with a smile. She then frowned looking at his wild long hair. "You never did cut your hair when you were younger." Naruto shrugged. "I like it this way," he said. "Besides, I had a dream once and I was told that if I don't cut my hair, I will become the most powerful person who will rewrite the history of the elemental nations." "Dream my foot," Ayami said with a snort. "Tell that to someone who believes it, but even if you did have the dream, does it mean you don't have to look after it? You're ruining your look like that." Naruto looked up and stared for a moment. "I thought I looked better this way," he said. Ayami just shook her head and walked away. Training Ground 7 Naruto wanted to seal more natural energy into the seal on his body, but he first needed to sort out something with the Bayu inside of him. The prison was something else, but Naruto didn't mind it too much. He simply walked over to the bars that held the Kyuubi and tapped in, seeing that its eyes were closed. "Are you going to ignore me?" "It depends on what you want to say to me." Naruto sighed. "You're still a little pissed off that the ghost of the Yondaime Hokage returned and strengthened the seal after I nearly released all of your power." He hadn't been out of control, but he had been close to releasing all the power and turning into the Kyuubi. It had been on purpose because he wanted to see how much of the Kyuubi's power he could release without the key. He wanted to see if he forcefully drew the chakra, would it break? But the ghost of the Yondaime had appeared and strengthened the seal. It wasn't so much as a ghost but the chakra the man sealed within the seal that held the Kyuubi for in case the seal was breaking. It was the same for his mother. But Naruto wasn't in a hurry to meet her. He could activate her chakra without meeting the requirement needed for it to activate automatically on command. "I was close to leaving this damned place." Naruto shook his head. "I was still very much under control of my body," the blonde said. "That said, I had prepared needed measures to ensure that you didn't go anywhere if you managed to wrestle control over my body. What do you want? I wonder, why are you desperate to be free from me? Why does my death make you afraid?" Naruto waited for a moment but the Kyuubi didn't say anything. "Minato separated your yin and yang chakra. He sealed half of your chakra within him and the other in him. But when he died, your other half wasn't released. He used the dead demon consuming seal, but that doesn't make a difference in the sense that using that seal only gives direction to where his soul goes. Minato used that seal to separate your chakra, not to seal you. The seal that sealed you in me is the same that sealed you in him. I have concluded that Minato has your other half in the belly of the Shinigami. I'm assuming that unless the seal is released, you will never leave me, even when I go to the afterlife, you will go with me, as your other half went to the other side with Minato. It is a bit of a tricky situation. Where father is doesn't determine anything. I am certain that if I freed his soul from where he is, you'll probably visit the other plane with him. Are you afraid that you'll be connected with me for all eternity if you don't separate from me while I am still alive? No other seal can do this. I assume this is because of the special characters of the 8 trigram sealing method. Kurama stared at Naruto for a long minute before finally responding. To you people, life and death means nothing, isn't it? Should someone who lives for all eternity say something like that? I am a Bayu, the Kyuubi said with indifference. You are a mere human and yet death doesn't scare you. No, you Uzumaki, death is like a state of traveling to another world for you. You have the masks to peer into the afterlife, where no other human can see. If your mother's body had been preserved, she may have already been summoned from the other world to this one. You're not going to answer my question, are you? Naruto said. It doesn't matter. When I die, I don't want you to follow me. However, whether you are free or sealed into another Jinchuriki really depends on your attitude. We will talk about this some other time. It appears that I have a guest. Sakura was nervous walking towards Naruto. She hasn't spoken to him in 3 long years. He was a kid last time, but now he looked like a man. His hair was longer, face manlier. He had the eyes of an experienced shinobi. Then again, Naruto's eyes had at times looked like that of an adult. Perhaps the difference was that now he had the body to back it up. Although nervous, Sakura managed a small smile when she stopped next to him. Hey, she said awkwardly. Naruto smiled, amused by her awkwardness. Have I become that much of handsome person that even you, who only has eyes for Sasuke, feel nervous when standing before me, Sakura? He asked lightly. Sakura glared for a moment. Don't get ahead of yourself, Naruto. When she stopped talking, she realized the awkwardness had vanished. Her body was no longer tense. He said those words on purpose. But even though he said it just to erase the tension, it wasn't exactly false. She smiled. Well, I'm sure you'll win a lot of girls. Not fangirls, Naruto said with a shake of his head. I saw you around. I don't want to live with that. Sakura didn't glare at Naruto. She had the decency to look embarrassed at her past behavior. She hadn't exactly been a Kunoichi back then, had she? She was just a naive girl who was playing shinobi. That was the past. I am different now. I would assume so, Naruto said. She had been training under Tsunade even before he left for his training trip, so it was to be expected that she changes. There was silence as Sakura gathered her thoughts. It is good to see you again, Naruto, she said. You didn't respond to my message, she managed to say. Ah, the apology. Naruto didn't have anything against people who were earnest in their apologies. Life was a fickle thing that could end at any time. No human was perfect, no human could do everything right. Sometimes people do things on purpose simply because they could. Such people needed to be crushed for their foolishness. They were stupid and blind, but still refused to see the light. Perhaps it was the same for Konoha's people. What did it gain him by holding a grudge against one foolish girl? Nothing. Unless he was a sadist who would enjoy seeing her suffer while trying to earn his forgiveness, then Naruto would go on that path. But he didn't enjoy such things. Besides, the girl hadn't been so bad. Compared to what he was given by many people, she was nothing. Perhaps irrelevant. He hadn't minded much of what she said. He could see her shouting, but he could not recall what she was saying. I wanted to look into your eyes before I say anything, Naruto said, holding out his right hand. Apology accepted, Sakura. But I do hope you have grown from that girl. Sakura stared at his hand before taking it. Of course, I have grown. You are not the only one who has seen changes, you know. I have also become strong. I really don't want to test that out, Naruto said, looking at the punch she had created with her fist. Tsunade taught you everything she knows, it seems. Sakura nodded. I had to learn. I realized I wasn't much of a Kunoichi when we were still a team. I wasn't much of a help when we came across different situations. But now when Sasuke comes back and Team 7 forms again, things will be different. Really? How naive was she? Did she really think that things would turn back to the way they were? Did she really think that they would all laugh and eat together as they did before Sasuke decided to turn against them? Ridiculous. Nothing was ever going to be the same. Naruto didn't even have the desire to be in Team 7 again. He would not join. That aside, he wasn't going to be here for far too long. He had many things to do with his life. Preparations though. Preparations were needed. Later that day friends. Perhaps this group could be put in that category, but they were not that close. Not too close to be called best friends. In your life, you had people you hanged out with, people you knew. But they were not necessarily close friends who could enter his den and share a meal with him. The Sandaime Hokage had been perhaps his best friend. There were a lot of things the old man did not say, even though he did tell him many things. For the third, it was just so that he could live without pressure. If things had been good, Hiruzen would have probably not told him anything. A possibility. It was cruel but not the reality. And Naruto was glad it was only just a possibility. He was sitting in a restaurant, the people he attended class with in the academy were around him. Not this only, but those who managed to become shinobi after graduating from their exams. He had gone to enter the Chunin exams with this group. They were good people, the only group of people to have treated him well. Ignorant of the reality, yes, but many people still hated him even though they didn't know anything. Naruto didn't have alcohol before him. He usually drank when he was in a bar. Besides, this was a group of people who had finally gathered together after some years. Sakura would not say everyone because Sasuke wasn't present, but most people would agree that the Uchiha had never been part of the group. Of course, she would never openly admit that. Why does it look like I am the only one who is still a genin around here? Naruto asked, looking around the group. It doesn't look that way. You are the only one who is still a genin. Chuji said while stuffing down food his throat. How he could find time to speak and eat at the same time was beyond comprehension. Naruto turned towards Ino. Ridiculous, he said, pointing at the Yamanaka blonde. Ino glared at him. What is that supposed to mean, Naruto? She demanded. No offense, but it is just ridiculous. Even you of all people is ranked higher than me. What kind of a world are we living in? He asked, looking around the group. I am offended. Ino exclaimed. I will admit that I wasn't any better when you were still around, but I have changed. I am no longer the same girl I was back then. If forehead could change, then so could I. You are offending me too, Ino. Sakura said, glaring at her childhood friend. If you still want to see who is better between you and me, we can still go to a training ground and I will take on. When Ino didn't say anything, it was apparent who was stronger between the two. Then again, Ino's style of fighting wasn't suitable for brawling. There was a bit of delicacy about it. Perhaps if it was someone like Chuji, then one could understand. It still doesn't make sense. I say rankings are pointless from now on. Kiba snorted. Says the genin, he said. Admittedly, it felt like a win for Kiba knowing that he was a chunin and Naruto was just a genin. It didn't matter who was stronger, the fact was he was of higher rank, and if there was a mission, seniority was given to him who was of higher rank, not the genin. He had lost to Naruto in the Chunin exams, perhaps a bit pathetically, but this was his victory and he wasn't going to allow anyone to blemish it. Shikamaru sighed. He was certain that Naruto really didn't care about this. Probably just brought the subject to be in control of what they talked about. This made his head ache just thinking about it. The blonde had always been a step above everyone. It was troublesome, hence Shikamaru stayed away. But he knew. He had heard the talk since he usually visited the Hokage's office. Naruto was probably stronger all of them. But he wasn't going to say that, was he? So, Naruto, I heard you fought Sasuke-kun, is it true? Did he beat you again? Ino asked a bit excitedly. Sasuke who? Naruto asked with a smile. Ino glared at him, but his smile only widened a bit. I don't remember. You'll have to jog up my memory a bit. If you help me, maybe I will remember. Ino folded her hands across her sizable burst. It was a chest that made Sakura envious. She had grown other parts, but that side just would not. Frustrating reality. What? When someone drinks a too much, screws loosen a bit in the head and they talk freely. Order some sake, we drink a bit, even you have to drink, then we'll see what drops out of my mouth. Maybe I will even mumble a few naughty things I did when I was training. You know, Jiraiya is a known perverted, wouldn't you want to hear some of the embarrassing things I caught him doing? The following day, Forest of Death. Naruto stood up from the ground, Sage Mode activated. The weight of the chakra caused the ground below him to shatter. The chakra was visible around his body. It was colorless, but clearly visible even to the naked eyes. He didn't do anything but deactivated the mode and sat down. A minute later, Neji appeared from the forest. Why are you watching me, Neji? Naruto asked in calm tone. Hinata didn't send you, did she? It was already a problem that she had to watch me because of her damn curiosity, but I don't need your eyes watching me. It wasn't my intention, but when I saw you sitting here alone, I grew curious. Neji said. Maybe his body language didn't show it, but he had been unnerved by what the Byakugan saw when Naruto stood up. The blonde was drawing chakra from nature, but that wasn't what had shocked him. He had been shocked by just how much chakra the blonde was able to draw out. Even when he was younger, Naruto already had more chakra than a Jonin. Kakashi has admitted that Naruto had more chakra than him. And yet, the blonde was still able to draw this much chakra. This had to be wrong, right? It had to be against the laws of everything for someone to possess as much chakra as the blonde has. When you no longer need the Byakugan to see someone's chakra, then something was very wrong. Neji had seen many shinobi, but he had never seen anyone who had so much chakra that it distorts that atmosphere around him. It was just ridiculous and he couldn't put a measure to it. But he knew, there was no one who came close to Naruto when it came to chakra, and we still didn't include the power of the Kyuubi. Naruto shook his head. What brought you here? Tsunade-sama sent me to you, Neji said. I'm not going to comment on the seals that I saw. They were just markings around Naruto's entire body. It was strange, not like anything he had seen before. It would be best if you don't comment or even say anything about it, Naruto said. But it isn't the first time you see, isn't it? Neji shook his head. So you are the son of the Yondaime Hokage. It was a statement, not a question. Naruto tilted his head to the side. He didn't think it would be something that this person would know since it was still a secret. It was probably never going to be told people, and Naruto didn't care enough for people to know. He didn't want to live under the shadow of his father. He didn't want to be forgotten and people see Minato's son. Then again, would these people of the Hidden Leaf willfully accept? But if they did not, would it bother him? Of course not, their views stopped being relevant some time ago. Yes, Naruto said with a nod. Who told you? I wasn't told about it, Neji said. That was true, and even when he asked, he was told that it was a village secret. He just had to think through things on his own. I just came to the conclusion about it when I was being told about your home village, Azushio. Tsunade-sama wanted us to know the important details before we headed there to hold talks with the village leaders. Naruto nodded. How did you take my ancestral home? He asked curiously. Neji was silent for a few moments. He didn't see much. They didn't let them see anything that made him curious or want to see more. What was apparent was that the village had more Uzumaki than they were willing to show them. Overall, it had looked like a normal village, but it was not. The people seemed happy nevertheless, and the air felt different. They were not happy to see the Byakugan and the Sharingan. They immediately knew the purpose. They are smart people. But there was no need to worry because they have Byakugan-proof wards all over the village. Naruto laughed at the frustrations of the Hyuga, which were clearly evident in his tone. You're dealing with Fuinjutsu masters who have been allies of Konoha since its founding. Of course they would know how to handle themselves in your all-seeing eyes. It was still something that had never happened before. We are proud of the Byakugan's ability to see through solid objects, but in that village, that rule doesn't apply. You only see as far as they want you to see. Neji said with a shake of his head. I'm certain they probably had someone with the Byakugan to proof-check their work to ensure there were no weak spots in their wards. Naruto smiled. I won't add anything on that, it is something only you can understand, he said with a shake of his head. How are things in the Hyuga clan? Fine. The clan head told me everything, my father's sacrifice. I do accept my role in the clan. But even so, since I am still the brightest the clan has to offer, they allow me to view things only those from the main family would normally view, Neji said. There are still some objections nevertheless. That is when you deal with people. Not everyone will agree to everything. Naruto said. Some people will refuse to see reason and facts even if it smacks them in their face. As long as it doesn't fit how they view things, they will reject it. You are skilled, but those who reject your elevation only do so because you are from the branch family. Neji nodded. But I cannot say, because at the end of the day, because I am from the branch family, I am fated for nothing. Konoha is preparing for war. The clans have already sat down. I was informed that if we do end up going to war, I will be leading the Hyuga forces. So we have been training together. Naruto smiled. That is something worth celebrating, but nothing much changes for you, does it? Neji asked calmly. The Hyuga clan avoided you by all means. I suspect the clan heads knew of your parenthood from the beginning, but instead of doing anything they chose to ignore you to protect themselves. Neji, you were not very wrong when you spoke about fate, Naruto said. There are certain things that you cannot avoid. As a Jinchuriki, you are fated to be hated, loathed because of the Bayu you hold within you. However, you were wrong to say that you cannot change things. Your circumstances have changed, but nothing much has changed with yours. Neji said. Naruto shrugged with indifference. It is a matter of attitude. If you want your story to change, it will change. You don't choose which family you were born into, but you choose how you live your life, even with the constraints that bind you. I am a Jinchuriki, but I can still live happily. You can say Jinchuriki are fated to live miserably and die alone, but that can be changed. Attitude means everything. Neji stared at Naruto. Why do I get the sense that you are just not willing to change things? It is attitude, I told you. I am just not willing to suck up to anyone to get them to like me. We cannot all be heroes. If I choose to become an Anbu, do you think this village will ever recognize me? Anbu fight to protect their village in the shadows. They are never known to the people. Nobody praises them. If I go that path, they will just glare at them as the useless shinobi who doesn't do anything. I refuse to live according to the wishes of someone. I chose my own path regardless of what people say, Naruto said. That is attitude, Neji. It seems to me that you have chosen a miserable path of existence, Neji said. Are you prepared for it? You don't make a decision to become a shinobi if you are not going to stand the killing, Neji. Unless you simply join to play a shinobi, Naruto said in a stern tone. I am prepared to face my journey and the glares that come with it. But it will be nothing new. I'm sure your cousin can testify to that. She has a whole experience of watching me. Neji could never work around the issue, but he wasn't going to comment on it. It had been something that young Hinata, certainly not something that she would do now. He would know, he was her guardian after all. What kind of person chooses a path that only brings misery? You are not even the kind to work in Anbu, not because of your personality. I think you would fit there, but because of your power. You are someone who would be utilized in the front line. Naruto would not disagree with that. He was training hard because he understood the role he would have to play. But if he was going to fight in the front lines, it would certainly not be for Konoha but for his own reasons. That can happen. People looking at you will be unavoidable. At the end of the day, it won't matter what you desire because as a shinobi, you'll still have to follow the instructions of the Hokage, as all shinobi do, Naruto said with a tired sigh. You are talking to me, and you said the Godime was looking for me, isn't she waiting? For you Hyuga, diligence is important, isn't it? Neji didn't seem to mind much about the issue, but he wasn't worried because he knew that there hadn't been an explicit order to return immediately. He didn't know why he had to find Naruto or why she was gathering the others from the little group of genins in their generation. We should go, he ended up saying. Hokage office. When Naruto arrived at the office, he was surprised to see the others waiting with the Godime Hokage. The blonde was busy with her work while the group stood by themselves, waiting. When they arrived, the eyes turned towards them. I didn't know you two got along, Sakura said, seeing Neji and Naruto walk in while chatting casually. Naruto shrugged in response. We just talked there and there, he said. Your indifference is mind-blowing, Ino said with a roll of her eyes. She realized, even last time, he seemed to speak with indifference. Perhaps it was something new he had picked up during his training with a self-proclaimed super pervert of a respected shinobi in the Hidden Leaf. Naruto smiled at Ino. Thank you for the praise, I always strive to blow people's mind. It was rather difficult to tell whether he was being sarcastic in his response because there hadn't been any hint of it. I wasn't praising you, the blonde Yamanaka said. Naruto blinked with mock surprise. Really? You are mocking me, aren't you? Ino said with a glare. When Naruto only smiled, she huffed before turning away from the Jinchuriki. She knew by now that she wasn't going to win anything with someone who seemed to have a response for anything you throw. Naruto stood next to Kiba and spoke to the Inuzuka. I'm jealous of the ladies in your teams. Hinata has filled up, Ino has filled up, tension his filled, he spoke in a whisper. But Sakura, Kiba turned around to face the pinkett and looked at her chest. He nodded to Naruto. I get you, he said. Did you know that the Godime was flat-chested when growing up? Naruto said once more. Those, he said pointing at Tsunade's chest, might not even be real. Before Kiba could respond, a dose of killing intent washed over the two, causing the Inuzuka to stiffen sharply under the might of the Godime Hokage. Naruto merely smiled at the blonde. Tsunade-sama, he said respectfully. What did you say to him? She demanded. I saw what you were pointing at. Nothing, Naruto said with a pleasant smile. This is a pleasant group you have gathered. Tsunade sighed. She was certain that he had been pointing at her chest and the way Kiba had looked at Sakura before was the same. She shook her head. He really was a student of Jiraiya. Then again, it could all be just a play. Even Jiraiya didn't seem to know how Naruto would do things. Even that smile of his was just flat. As you already know, we have changed things in the academy and your Jonin senseis have been taking your training seriously. I want to see your progress. Tomorrow, we are going to have a match. It will be a sparring competition in which I will see how far you have progressed in your training. Naruto looked interested in this. I hope it isn't teams against teams, Bar-chan, Hokage-sama, Sakura corrected Naruto in a stern tone. At this point, Tsunade didn't seem to care how Naruto addressed her. It is, she said. Did you have a better idea? You want to see how they are able to coordinate and play along as a team, right? Team 7 hasn't been training and all that. It would also be boring for me if it is in that form. It would be best if you make it all the teams against me, Naruto said with a smile. I think that would be worth the challenge. I am the one who went out on a 3-year training trip and still is a genin. I'm sure these guys don't want to be bested by a mere genin. You're overly overconfident, Kiba said with a grin. But I don't hate it at this time, he said. Team 8 will take you on at any time. Tsunade stared at Naruto for a moment before smirking. Jiraiya praises your skills, his skills are cage level and he says at full power, you are better than him, as a Sannin. Going against a team of Chunins is unfair. Even Kakashi if he is fighting seriously would still win. Prepare yourselves tomorrow. Training ground 8, 10 a.m. sharp. Don't be late, she gave her order. The rest of you can leave. Naruto, stay behind. What about me, Tsunade-sama? You will be acting as backup in all matches, you will be offering your medical expertise. Medical? Shikamaru asked. Why does it sound like it is going to be too much of a work? Of course there will be work. Tsunade said in a stern tone. A war could break out any time, you must be ready. Your group needs to act as an example, because in your generation, you are the best Konoha has. Tomorrow, you will be fighting to the best of your abilities. A match will end when I say it is over. Konoha has the best medical nins in the elemental nations, you need not worry about dying. Dying? They looked at the Godime with surprise. Your senseis always tell you that when you fight them, you must come with the intent to kill. If you cannot attack Naruto with everything you have, you will get hurt. Tsunade said. Prepare yourselves. If I see that you haven't made improvements since you became Chunins, there will be consequences to you and your senseis. Slowly but surely, the group departed from the office leaving just Naruto and Tsunade. The former sat down on the chair in front of the Godime's desk. He stared at the Senju for a long minute before shaking his head, she was also staring at him. Is there anything that I have been reported to have done? Why would you ask that? You won't know what Jiraiya framed me for doing, Naruto said with a shrug of his shoulders. I want to talk to you about Temari, Tsunade said in a measured tone. She studied Naruto trying to see if she could get any reaction from him but she didn't get anything. He just looked back at her without even twitching. The delightful Subaku, he hadn't seen her since that day he left her in the river country. Perhaps a bit unkind of him but he would always have the memories. The days in Sunagaku had been truly pleasant because of her presence, because she had been there and indulged him. When she came here, you asked her about me, he said. What did she ask you? Nothing, she was curious but she didn't ask much. I also know there are things she didn't tell me when I asked her about what you did in Suna, the Godime said in a firm tone. I just want to know, what do you think about her? I could understand with Jiraiya, but I don't really think you want to get that deeper with my personal life, Naruto responded calmly. Why are you asking? Are you not going to answer my question? I will have to see her again to actually know. But admittedly, my time with her had been delightful. I don't hate her, he really didn't want to use the word, like, in this situation because he could sense that there was something in the making. He didn't want to get involved in it. Not when he was just being pushed by someone. Tsunade smiled. I'm glad, she said. Did you think that you could not hate someone when you were younger? I didn't see anything because I wasn't around, but I do get the picture of how things must have been. I can't claim to really understand it, but I can see it must have been miserable. It really was miserable, Naruto said with a small nod of his head. But what do you live for if you cannot hope? I did hope for a better tomorrow. I did hope for many things, because when things are not going well in your life, all you can do is hope, Tsunade-sama. Hope is what drives you, it gives you the confidence to push forward. For a couple of moments, there was silence. I want you to know that I really do care for you, Naruto. I want you to be happy with your life and the decisions you make. You were robbed of the childhood you could have had because you became a Jinchuriki. I want to give you an option to choose how you live to make yourself happy. If you want to go back to Team 7 again, I will make it happen. If you don't want it and want to operate separately, I can still make it happen. The Godime spoke in a warm tone, full of emotion. But it was only as long as he was living in Konoha, serving Konoha. Well, a Kage was supposed to think like that. And I really appreciate that, Naruto said with a smile. Well, if nothing goes wrong, we should be able to live happily. He paused for a moment before asking. Are you content with your life? Tsunade stared, trying to understand what Naruto was asking. When she got it, she responded in a quiet tone. I don't want anything more now. Protecting this village is what I can live for. I have experienced many things in the past. I won't die with any regrets. Perhaps sometime in the future, we shall sit together and share a bottle of sake while talking about those experiences, Naruto said. I'm not drinking with you. Naruto just laughed before standing up. There shouldn't be anything wrong with that. I am growing and I am sure I will reach a point where you will feel comfortable to say anything to me, he grinned. You know, like how lonely the bed can be at night, the Godime threw something towards the blonde but he dodged it. I shouldn't have sent you with Jiraiya, Tsunade said with a stare. Konoha, Training Ground 8. Kurenai looked around the training ground. The senseis had already gathered as well as their students. They were not supposed to give them instruction, but they had to fight for themselves without the guidance. Kurenai didn't doubt her team, but she questioned the intelligence of allowing just one person to fight all the other teams. Even though he wouldn't be fighting them all at once, this was simply saying that he was stronger than all of them by a big distance. Naruto had grown, but just how strong could he have become? She hadn't seen anything outstanding during the Chunin exams. He was training under a Sannin, but so has Sakura. But the Godime Hokage seemed to have confidence in his abilities. Kurenai would not question the Hokage. She was just going to watch, but she doubted things would be anything surprising. Then again, he was a Jinchuriki, he could use the Kyuubi's power. Was it safe using it in such conditions though? Kakashi, your student is truly displaying the confidence of youthfulness, Guy said in a proud tone as he stared at Naruto. To have the confidence to take on a three-man squad, it was outstanding. It was the kind of test that one could set for himself to test his limits. He hasn't been my student in 3 years, Kakashi said with a shrug. He is Jiraiya-sama's student, the Jonin said. Where is the man himself? Probably left village already, Kakashi said. It is a shame that he isn't here to see Naruto express himself, Guy said with a small nod. Do you think he will do it? Kurenai asked with caution. The others have also grown as well. And they have been training hard over the past months to prepare for future battles. Kakashi stared at Naruto for a moment. He had fought the blonde, and so he would know. He knew that none of the teams could match up to Naruto. He had certainly been training hard with Jiraiya and not fooling around. His progress was nothing short of miraculous. Only Naruto could grow in such a pace because of chakra levels. He is also not constrained to a certain style of fighting unlike the others. You'll see, Kakashi said. I am interested in how your students have grown though. Tsunade clapped her hands to get everyone's attention when she arrived in the training ground with Shizune. She smiled seeing that everyone was present. She was truly interested in seeing what Naruto could do. Jiraiya praised him and Kakashi had nothing but praise as well. But the times coming ahead would require for him to fight not just for Konoha but for the Uzumaki as well. Maybe some people would disagree with her, but she didn't care. She was the Godime Hokage and she alone decided what to do with her shinobi. If she was sending them to war, no one had the authority to say no. I hope you all came prepared because I don't want to see anyone taking things easy. We don't know what will happen in the future, but you must be prepared for anything. It isn't just you who have to be prepared, but everyone has to be prepared, from Jonan to Jenin. This is a friendly match, but you are fighting with the intention to kill. I also want to see if your formation's at work. Over the next weeks, we will prepare training specifically designed for each time. Kurenai's team is useful for tracking. We will design a training program that will test your tracking abilities. But for today, I just want to see your abilities. If you are fighting in the front lines, how well do you fight? If you disappoint me, I will strip you of your rankings and put you a level below. You will have to enter another exam to regain the rank you lost. This isn't just reserved to just you, there will be many who will face this fate. I have given an instruction for all shinobi to train. If you don't have an improvement, we will deal with you. Even Jonins who have slacked off in their training can be demoted to just Chunins. Konoha has always produced the best shinobi because our Jonins are strong. A Chunin from the Hidden Leaf was usually able to fight some Jonins from other hidden villages. But over the years, we have slacked off, but no more. Naruto was amused by all that talk. Many shinobi were Chunins but had poor attitudes and not just strong enough. They were going to have to return their Chunin vests, a pitiful experience that was going to be. But no one could blame anyone. It was apparent that with how things are, people like Sakura and Ino would have never become genin if they didn't improve their levels. So there was no more playing shinobi. Everyone had to be serious. The future was certainly going to be difficult. I expect all of you to move in if something fatal is going to happen, Tsunade said addressing the Jonin senseis. The Jonins saluted. Tsunade turned to Naruto. I hope you are ready and will not disappoint me and Jiraiya, she said with a stare. This is under your terms, and you know you have a role to play in the future. If you are not strong enough, you will die. You won't be able to protect anything. Simply having the desire to do something isn't enough, you need to have the prowess and will to do it. Naruto nodded. He understood that perfectly. Let us start with Team Guy, I think they will set the stage, he said with a wide smile. Tsunade was certain that Guy's team was stronger than the other teams. Neji and Lee were exceptional shinobi. Lee might not be able to use ninjutsu, but he could not be underestimated. Guy could easily be their trump card if he was willing to pay the price for using the power he could wield. Are you sure? If I lose, I can always be mocked by the others for thinking that I had the strength to take him on. It will also be a challenge for me. Circumstances are always not going to be favorable. Besides, you can always heal me, Naruto said with a shrug. Tsunade nodded. No using that power, she warned. But we will have to go through that to prepare our shinobi in case they ever have to face a Jinchuriki in battle. Normal shinobi. What could they do in battle? Fighting a Beiyu was simply a way to die for people who didn't have the might to battle against the power of a Beiyu. Naruto wasn't going to voice his thoughts. He simply nodded. Team Guy, Tsunade called out. Anything goes, I won't repeat myself. Although Lee was jumping up and down about the prospect of facing someone who was prepared to fight all of them, Neji wasn't so confident. Tenten, Neji called his teammate. Keep your distance, Lee and I will get close. When you see an opportunity, use it, I will keep watch with my Byakugan. I will also give you an opening. Tenten nodded. Just make sure Lee doesn't get overexcited, she said. Neji mere grunted. He wasn't going to be able to do that. The stamina freak wouldn't settle down if he got too excited. Neji was certain that Lee was going to get his match and that would only put him to try with everything he has. You heard her, Lee, the taijutsu user merely grinned. I will do my best, Neji-kun. That isn't what I was saying, Neji said before shaking his head. You can start. Tsunade shouted. Lee, make the first move. Neji ordered. Yosh. By the time the word reached Neji, the taijutsu user was already darting towards Naruto. Neji followed slowly, covering himself with his teammate. Naruto took a stance seeing Lee charge towards him. The green-clad shinobi flashed in front of him, his right foot swept through the air in blinding speed, heading towards Naruto's left shoulder. Naruto raised his left hand trying to put up a defense. The moment Lee's foot collided with his hand, Naruto regretted it. There was much more strength than anticipated and he was pushed towards his left, slightly. Lee lifted his left foot. It picked up dust as it flashed towards Naruto's face. The blonde channeled wind into his right palm and caught the kick. Lee wasn't deterred. His right foot followed shortly, but it was caught around the ankle. Lee held his hands together and tried to slam them above Naruto's head. The moment the taijutsu user did that, Neji flashed behind Naruto, his feet twisting with his right hand glowing with chakra. He aimed a strike on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto knew he couldn't replace himself in time to avoid the attack, but he could still attack Lee and move fast enough to hit Neji, but he would still get hit. He breathed in air, wind bullet. He released a wind bullet from his mouth. It sped out in incredible speed and slammed into Lee's chest. Before it connected, Naruto had already let go of Lee's legs. The jutsu was sent flying backwards by the force of the jutsu. The moment Naruto's jutsu hit Lee, Neji slammed his palm on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto was already twisting around, a wind blade on his right hand. He twisted anti-clockwise, with his right hand stretched out. Neji saw the attack coming with his Byakugan and bent backwards, watching the swift pass through just above him. His left hand touched the ground and he used it as balance before he lifted his right foot, and swung it towards Naruto. Naruto was forced to jump away from Neji. The moment he landed, he was forced to look to his left, projectiles were coming towards him. He couldn't move his hand from the shoulder because of Neji's attack. He really shouldn't have allowed the Hyuga to get close to him. The projectile seemingly hit him but he disappeared in a puff of smoke. He appeared small distance away, but the moment he touched the ground, he was forced to leap into the air. Lee was crashed down towards him with his right foot stretched out. The taijutsu user crashed into the ground in a loud boom, but a second later, he was twisting around in front of Naruto in midair. Naruto crossed his hands just front of his face as Lee's vicious kick came close. The kick connected, and sent him flying backwards. Naruto flipped several times before crashing into the ground with his hands still crossed in front of his face. He straightened his body and observed the team and smiled. You use your view of the field quite well, Neji. Lee, you move fast. And Tenten is waiting to pounce for any moment. But both Neji and Lee are taijutsu users, they need to get close to me to do any damage. For Lee, covering the distance is quite simple because of the speed. You are a good team. I shall assault you now. You will forgive the pain you will experience, but if you can dance, you will avoid it. Naruto said in a stern tone. He was no longer smiling. There was a spike of his chakra as he fixed up the chakra flow on his right hand. The second that followed, he was gone. There were only gusts of wind picking up dust from his wake. He appeared in front of Tenten along with the wind. He created a fist with his right hand and drove it towards Tenten's face. When Naruto felt Lee's presence, his left hand moved up. The taijutsu user flashed in between him and Tenten. Lee punched Naruto's hand away, directing it away from Tenten's path. In that moment, Tenten leapt away to create some distance between her and the two. Naruto's hand grabbed Lee's outstretched hand with his left hand. You're excellent in taijutsu and your reflexes are quite honestly frightening, but you have one weakness. His eyes turned crimson as he channeled the Kyuubi's chakra. Genjutsu, he finished. Naruto summoned natural energy before slamming a wind-enhanced punch on Lee's chest. There was a sickening sound when the punch connected with Lee's chest. The taijutsu user coughed up blood through his mouth as he fell onto his knees. Sensing the incoming Neji, Naruto used his hold on Lee to twist him around and then hurl him towards the Hyuga. Neji cursed as he was forced to catch Lee. Naruto flashed behind him just above the ground, and slammed a wind-enhanced kick on the Hyuga's back. Neji yelped as pain shot through his body before being sent flying away along with Lee. The moment Naruto touched Neji, he was forced to look up as he sensed something. He frowned when he saw a huge wave of water falling down on him. The water slammed on his body, sending him crashing to the ground. Tenten summoned the lightning jutsu she had stored in her scroll and directed it towards the water. While covered by the water, the lightning flashed through the water, and shocked Naruto. The blonde had smoke coming out his body after the jutsu stopped. He hadn't even made a sound even though it had hurt like crap. I see, so you can store ninjutsu in those scrolls. I thought you could only summon weapons, Naruto stated calmly. He had already deactivated natural energy the moment he threw Lee towards Neji, so he had taken damage here. Tenten hurried towards Neji and Lee. Naruto held out his right hand, he formed a ball of flames. He jumped into the air before kicking it towards the three, but it blasted above them. They did feel the heat nevertheless. Naruto snapped his fingers. Flame explosion, the flames exploded, just after missing the three. It created a large cloud of crimson flames that produced increased levels of heat in the training ground. Sakura jumped into the scene and knelt down before Lee. She frowned when she tried to heal him. There was massive damage on his chest. No opponent will allow you to heal an enemy he has just defeated. Sakura froze, hearing Naruto's menacing voice from behind her. There was considerable amount of heat in the atmosphere. She glanced towards the blonde from behind, on the palm of his right hand. There was a small ball of red flames. And I won't be nice enough to let you heal him. Aren't you taking this a bit seriously? Sakura asked with sweat on her forehead. If we end up in war, will you be asking that question? Naruto asked before he took a step forward. Tenten threw a bomb towards him. Naruto wasn't able to dodge the paper bomb when it hit him on his chest before exploding. The explosion also set off the jutsu on his palm, causing him to be surrounded by a column of flames. The flames didn't burn for a second as they suddenly vanished. After the smoke screen disappeared, he turned towards Tsunade. This isn't exciting, can they all just come at me all at once? Maybe I will be forced to fight, he said in a bored tone. Sakura will be healing the others and perhaps Lee will use those nasty gates of life. It will be problematic, but at this stage, I'm not being challenged. Perhaps it was her anger incited by Naruto's bored tone, but Tsunade ordered the others join in. Sakura, you are not to heal him. And unless Naruto is unable to move, there will be no end to this. Naruto frowned. You really want to see me in the hospital, don't you? Later that day Kakashi smiled towards Naruto as he landed on the roof of the blonde's apartment block. The blonde was sitting in a meditative position. Senjutsu? He asked. Naruto nodded. I have to learn how to gather chakra quickly. It really is proving to be a challenge, he said with a sigh. Came to see if I am nursing some wounds. Kakashi shook his head. I just wanted to talk to you. We haven't talked since you returned to the village. We didn't even talk much that day I came to visit you. He felt awkward saying those words. Perhaps it was the circumstances that surrounded them. He had seen Naruto's progress as a shinobi and he was a little bitter over his failure in being a teacher to Naruto. He wanted to talk about it and perhaps about Minato. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment and then breathed out to break his concentration. What do you want to ask? Do you hate me? Naruto looked at the Jonin curiously. Why such a question, Kakashi? No longer sensei. Then again, it was what he deserved. Even if Sakura still called him sensei, it was certainly just out of formalities than being a real sensei to her. Tsunade and Shizune taught the girl everything. He couldn't do anything for her. You know already that I was your father's student. You must have assumed that I know some of his techniques like his signature move. Naruto stared at the Jonin for a long minute. The man felt off talking about this subject. Seeing him fighting earlier on during the day, Kakashi must have been reminded of his dear sensei. From what Tsunade sent him that other day, Kakashi had been really close to the Yondaime Hokage. The man had demons on his closet and his father had been truly there for him. Well, you were his star student, and since Jiraiya knows it as well, I did assume you know it. But I wasn't sure since you never used it. Kakashi held out his right hand. A small Rasengan formed on the palm of his hand. He then cancelled it before speaking. He taught it to me. The Jonin paused for a moment. He settled down before speaking to me. I didn't teach you anything even though I was your sensei. Even during the Chunin exams, I only found a Chunin, who is only a Chunin in name. I focused my attention on Sasuke because I somehow felt that he needed it more than you did. I thought if I focused on training him, maybe he wouldn't feel inferior to you and decide to leave the village. But that didn't help, Naruto said with a flat tone. Yeah, Kakashi said before falling silent. Your father was a sensei to me. He taught me even his prized jutsu, but I couldn't teach you anything. Even at a moment when I should have really taught you something, I showed favoritism, and chose Sasuke. Maybe it was because the Sandaime ordered me, but I still wouldn't have taught you anything. Naruto looked up into the sky for a long minute. It was getting dark. There was a comfortable air that was going to wash over the village very soon, and he would enjoy it while at the top of the Hokage monument. Perhaps he could find time to get his mind working on seals. Perhaps he could do something for Lee to help him cover his tracks when it came to genjutsu. In cases he ever found himself separated from his teammates, he would be in trouble. But then again, the likelihood that he would find a shinobi who is going to use illusions wasn't much. Genjutsu was difficult to use. The most powerful shinobi haven't been good with the art. The Sandaime had you train Sasuke, Naruto said in a quiet tone. He then shrugged indifferently. The words you taught me will never leave me, sensei. Personally, you have taught words that I think are fundamental and should be taught in the academy. Your words are what build friendships, a sense of true duty. You know, there is a difference between trying to save someone because you were ordered to do it and doing it because you love them. I think for shinobi that should be a fundamental rule. I came to this conclusion because of how you care for your colleagues. Do you think that is enough? Who can tell? But what do you think is important, sensei? Naruto didn't wait for Kakashi to respond before speaking again. You focused on team building exercises were much more important. A connection with your teammates, that should be the fundamental step. But ultimately not enough if you are not trained to fight. Naruto nodded. Yes, he said. But it doesn't change the fundamental rule. To be principled, stronger, and united, you need not just share a common goal. You need to care for each other. The raw emotion of fighting for those you love is stronger than anything. We are humans, people of love, hate and anger drive us. You taught me to care for friends, for those I fight for, that is why I have become stronger. That is what drives me. I want to protect those I love. Seeing Kakashi looking at him, Naruto just smiled. I guess you are wondering what I want to protect. I never mentioned anything, and probably have never mentioned anything by name. That does make me wonder, but either way, it really doesn't matter to me. If it is Azu or Konoha, it is your choice. I would only fault you if you turned a blind eye on Azushio. Regardless of everything, that is the village your mother was born, and you'd probably be treated better there. Naruto laughed. You'll get in trouble if people hear you say those words, sensei. The Jonin shrugged with indifference. I wouldn't care. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.